This is Brother Peter Diamond, vaticancatholic.com. I just finished watching this 5-part series on YouTube called What the Pope Knew, CNN. We have a link to at least part 1, and we'll probably have a link to all 5 parts on our website. It is truly something. Brother Michael wanted me to watch it, and I'm glad that I did. It gets into what Benedict XVI knew about some of the more notorious cases of sexual abuse by perverts in the Vatican II sect and how he covered it up, slowed the process which would remove and excommunicate these deviants, and it really shows how dark this Vatican II sect is and these sick, disgusting monsters who were operating in the priesthood. These guys are homosexual perverts. Some of them go after young girls and young boys, and yet they claim to officiate as Catholic priests. And then you have these apostate bishops covering it up, and even after they have solid evidence that these guys have definitely engaged in this kind of activity, not just some baseless accusation, they don't remove them completely and excommunicate them and defrock them. They simply transfer them to different parishes. And this 5-part series gets into how Benedict XVI was intimately involved in the cover-up of all of this, and how he is, without any question, an accessory to these crimes of sexual abuse and pedophilia. And this case that they look at in part 1 with the German priest, they claim, well, there were 1,000 priests in the diocese and he didn't know anything about it. Well, I find that almost impossible to believe, because as the interviewer asked the Vatican representative how many of them were found guilty of abusing children, obviously that probably wasn't that many. So he was almost definitely aware of it and covered it up. And then we have the other case where the woman accuses Benedict XVI of being just as guilty as the apostate sicko who molested her, because she believes the evidence is clear that he stalled the process for condemning and removing this deviant. And so it really shows what you're dealing with Benedict XVI. You're dealing with one of the most evil people on earth. And it's also quite revealing that all of the quote, conservative groups in the Novus Ordo are in an uproar against this piece that CNN did, saying that, oh, it's false, and what a slander, and etc., because they worship Benedict XVI. They don't have the faith, so all they have is the figurehead. For that reason, they must keep his image untainted in their eyes. They cannot accept any dose of reality that this guy is not only a total apostate and a heretic, but he's a moral deviant who enabled and facilitated the sexual abuse of children, young people, etc. This 5-part series also revisits the case of Bernard Law. It only makes a quick mention of it. This notorious heretic in Boston who moved these child molesters around, and he was given a promotion and has authority in Rome and was given this special position by John Paul II. That's the reality of the counterchurch. That's the evil underneath the vestments and the fact that they're in control of what were the Catholic Church's buildings. The reality is demonic, and it really strips away the facade that these heretics who cling to this counter-church and do not realize that the true church still exists but in a remnant, how deceived they are because they're clinging to something that's just a fictitious appearance and an act. Underneath what they see is a deception. It should also be noted that this piece that CNN did tries to portray Benedict XVI as a doctrinal conservative. They clearly show how he enabled and facilitated these sexual abusers and did nothing to stop them. But they give the impression that when it came to people who were deviating in doctrinal matters, he was quick to act. And they give the example of this editor of the America magazine how Benedict XVI pushed for him to be removed. Well, anyone who has carefully read Benedict XVI's books and or speeches, as we have, knows that the claim that he is a doctrinal conservative is a sick joke. He is a raging apostate who accepts every heresy and every heretical idea you could bring forward. Any subject we could get into, he teaches heresy on. Any council you could bring up, he denies. He is a total apostate, but he was compelled, we believe, by the devil to do a few things in this regard, to promote this idea that he is this doctrinal conservative, because his role, as some of our material covers about where we believe we are in the end times, his role is to be the false prophet for, quote, conservative members of the counterchurch. So he has to keep up this appearance as if he is a doctrinal conservative, while he lets the pedophiles run wild and promotes gross heresy and apostasy. And so it's all part of the deception involved. It should also be noted that CNN, which is extremely pro-Jewish, pro-homosexual, and in fact the individual who was spearheading this piece, Gary Tuchman, is a Jewish correspondent of CNN. They have quite a few of them. They, without question, tried to disgrace the Catholic Church as much as they could in this piece, and you can see it even down to the subtle details. For instance, when they're interviewing the one individual who said he was abused as a young man and now is married and became a Lutheran, they go to all the spots where he said the abuse occurred, in the confessional, really trying to create the impression and ingrain it on people's minds that look at what takes place in this hidden place of the confessional. And they even show the sign that says face-to-face confessions only, implying that this kind of secrecy and intimate meeting could only speak to something nefarious and sexually perverted. And so they, of course, did their, quote, best to disgrace the Catholic Church, because most people think the counterchurch is the Catholic Church, not recognizing that it isn't in the eyes of the world. You could also see it when they showed Bernard Law, this notorious monster who moved around the pedophiles in Boston. They show the picture of him giving the invalid host of the new Mass on the tongue to the individual in a sort of up-close shot. And it's subtle, but what they want to show is that look at this face-to-face, almost mouth-to-mouth meeting. And so all of this is done deliberately. So I found it to be a striking reminder of just how dark the counterchurch is and how wicked Benedict XVI is. Think about the fact that these so-called bishops were dealing with admitted and/or convicted child molesters, and they did not remove them from the priesthood. That is mind-boggling. It also reveals how rotten things were in the years just before Vatican II, because some of this abuse occurred in the early 1960s. That means that you had some of these perverts in the pre-Vatican II priesthood under Pius XII. Surely they believed that souls can be saved in any religion. For example, that mind-bogglingly evil case of Father Murphy, who was molesting the boys at the deaf school, that occurred beginning, I believe, in 1960 and was subsequently covered up by the counterchurch and Benedict XVI. But that reveals that there were problems with the priests before Vatican II, and that ties in with the doctrinal breakdown that was occurring even then. So, to watch the full series, you just have to find it on YouTube. It's called What the Pope Knew, CNN. There are 5 parts. It should actually be called What the Anti-Pope Knew.